So good morning, everybody. Happy to see all of you. Excellent. This meeting is being recorded. Do I press continue? Okay, so we have an announcement we'd like to make, and in case all of you can't be present for this event next Saturday, we wanted to bring it to you today. So as many of you know, or perhaps you don't, Bob Holman is a poet, and he is a member of the howlarts.org, and they are doing this Saturday an event from 2 to 7 on howlarts.org to honor Lawrence Ferlinghetti, who I think he was 101 when he died here recently. And so they have asked, the group has asked people to participate in the reading of some of Ferlinghetti's poems. And Sokuzan is greatly honored to have been included in that reading. And so he's going to read poem number 8. And I just wanted to let you know that if you go to howlarts.org next Saturday, May 29th, starting at 2 o'clock, you'll be able to see who all else is going to be reading. And I see Bob live on the screen here. Do you want to add anything to that, Bob?
It's of course, it's a long time, 2 to 7, and there's a lot of things that are going to happen. It's so wonderful that Sokuzan will be reading the 8th poem of Coney Island in the Mind, which when I knew we were going to read it, I mean, we all know those words from Sokuzan, and now we'll get to hear him with the origin tale of how that happened. It's the whole poem, the collection of poems called Coney Island in the Mind takes about 35 minutes to read. It will be done near the beginning and near the end. That's about all I know at this point. So next Saturday, 2 to 7 Eastern time. Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening to other time zones, if there happens to be some of those. So I will read this first before we do the Dharma Talk. As you know, I sometimes refer to Ferlinghetti's The Coney Island of the Mind, because I often say, and I said then, and I've said other times about other books, if a book is really good, all you have to do is read the title. You don't have to read anything else. But in this case, why not? I haven't read this in a few years. So this is number 8 by Lawrence Ferlinghetti. I will keep the stumbling to a minimum. In Golden Gate Park that day, a man and his wife were coming along through the enormous meadow, which was the meadow of the world. He was wearing green suspenders and carrying an old beat-up flute in one hand, while his wife had a bunch of grapes which she kept handing out individually to various squirrels, as if each were a little joke. And then the two of them came on through the enormous meadow, which was the meadow of the world, and then at a very still spot where the trees dreamed and seemed to have been waiting through all time for them. They sat down on the grass without looking at each other, and ate oranges without looking at each other, and put the peels in a basket which they seemed to have brought for that purpose, without looking at each other. And then he took his shirt off and an undershirt off, but kept his hat on sideways, and without saying anything, fell asleep under it. And his wife just sat there looking. The birds which flew about, calling to each other in the stilly air, as if they were questioning existence or trying to recall something forgotten. But then finally, she lay down flat and just lay there looking up at nothing, yet fingering the old flute which nobody played. And finally, looking over at him without any particular expression, except a certain awful look of terrible depression. Beautiful. Thank you, Bob, for inviting me to participate in this upcoming event next Saturday. I think we'll send a video of that. One of the technical people will take care of that. So today's, it's a good idea. We should have that happen every time. So that was a rehearsal then. That's a joke, what I just said. So today's Dharma Talk is titled, what was it titled? Junchu?
Trying to see more clearly.
Trying to see more clearly. Stop that. Trying to see more clearly. Don't do that. You might as well be looking for something and going towards something else. I'm happy to respond to questions, but I'm going to say a few more words about this. Anytime you're trying, anytime you're efforting, anytime, even though there are teachings that talk about effort. What is it? Sandru? Is that what the Tibetan is for that? And what is it? Sanskrit? Virya. So it doesn't mean push. It doesn't mean go after. It doesn't mean run towards. It doesn't mean like the myth of Sisyphus, who pushed the boulder up the hill, it would roll back down, and then Sisyphus, he, she, they would get to the bottom and pull it back up again, and over and over and over, rotation, not even being aware of the cycle, just suddenly finding themselves at the bottom of the hill and pushing again, pushing it back up. Don't do that. If you're at the top of the hill, just hang out there. If you're at the bottom of the hill, hang out there. If you're halfway up the hill, hang out there. When I say hang out, don't attach to that. Don't do anything with it. Just wherever you're at, that's where you're at. Wherever you're at, that's where you're at. There isn't anything else. I've said this 20 times, maybe more. Wherever you're at, that's where you're at. This teaching is not something I'm dreaming up. It's something I'm looking at. I'm looking at it. Not even a credential particularly, but because I see it, I can speak about it. All I have to do is have the title of the book. Everything else just flows. So that's why it's all in the title. What's the title again?
Trying to see more clearly.
Yeah, don't do that. The effort to see more clearly, there's a certain quality of that. As soon as it starts up, that's appropriate. That's like Trungpa Rinpoche would say, first thought, best thought. But that doesn't mean you take the first thought and struggle with it until it gets to, you feel like you're getting some kind of a fruition out of it. This has been said in lots of different ways. Start where you're at. The path is the goal. Those kinds of things. So it's a very interesting area, because if we push too much, we actually stop the very, you could say, investigation that we are endeavoring to do, to the very path quality, because the path is not running along in the conventional way. It's just called the path or the road. Talk about it in some way, so we talk about it that way. But once you begin to practice, once you begin to study, once you begin to relate to the teacher, the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha, then everything else, it will take over in its own way. This is why you will hear me say, don't do anything unless you have to. And if you were to say to me, well, should I stop sitting? I said, you have to sit. Then one person might say, yeah, I do. Another person, and then I would say, sit. And if they said, I don't really have to sit, I would stop. And then they might say, well, I can't do that. Actually find out that they can. This is why the way I teach block sitting, which some of you have heard, is it's the form. Observe the form. Don't obey anybody. Observe the form. Strike the bell. 4 hours later, strike the bell again. And insofar as you can, without arm wrestling your mind, sit still and observe what continues to move. But if you need to get up, then do that. Be respectful. If your body's talking to you through your nerve endings. I know down through the centuries that's been taught differently when men were in charge of everything. Trungpa Rinpoche had a little bit of an idea coming up when he said, make friends with yourself. So even though he'd been raised in a very strict monastic tradition where he was literally beaten by his trainers, monks, other monks in the monastery that were, it was their job, they've been doing this for centuries, to make sure the little scallywag minds. So it's also not about going another way and just detaching, being a detached person. Anytime you have any credential about anything, no matter what it is, this is the very nature of delusion, is thinking there's someone who can feel this, or someone who can feel that, or someone who can get rid of this or gain this, or train your mind for that matter. Not a mundane path or of accomplishment of getting somewhere, but a spiritual path of no conclusion. You can't conclude what you already are. You already are, not separate from the Buddha, not a fancy word. We're talking about 2,500 years ago. Somebody understood something about the nature, the deep, deep nature of being a living being. And they shared it with others. And it became a world religion. So we need some forms, otherwise the whole situation will collapse. We need some kind of a, I sometimes say, some kind of a backbone for everything else to be supported by, some kind of a structure form. This is why we chant the sutras. If you've tuned in at 7 o'clock in the morning, Eastern, you'll see that that happens here several days a week, 4 days a week, I think, four weekdays and 5 days a week altogether.
Sundays, so 6 days.
Sundays a little bit later. Anyway, we emphasize that form. I emphasize the form. People want that to help, so to do that, so that's what we do. More theistic approach to this is that this is somehow holy, something we have to do because there's some kind of payoff. If we continue to be good, we'll get to heaven or something like that. That's not incorrect. It's just a form of relative thinking. Not wrong. Some people, that's all they can do. What we're doing here is you're all, samsara and nirvana are not separate. You're already there. Path is the goal. But it may take a while to see that. You may have to go through various kinds of subterfuge of your own mind or your own karma, which keeps yanking this way, pulling this way, magnetizing you this way. And it's about, so far as you can, through the sitting practice of meditation, through training, through studying the concepts that come down to us from the Buddha himself, and through all the lineage holders down through the centuries, and there have been thousands of them. Might have to use some of those concepts to help support this situation, which is very circular and full of grasping, rejecting, and shutting down. It is not about stopping any of that, controlling any of that. It is about seeing it, fundamentally seeing what this is, so that you see it. You may think about it, you may not. You may turn it into some concepts, you may not.
She is unbound. The title is trying to see more clearly. And is there any sort of refinement that we should try to do?
The refinement, there are several, depending on sometimes individually, I might change based on what I see a person is dealing with. So that's why I think it's necessary to have a connection, a personal connection with a teacher. Doesn't have to be me. What I'm saying may not add up for you or may not make any sense. Maybe you need to talk to someone else. But if you're consider yourself a student of the Buddha's Dharma, I have to have a teacher.
I was just wondering about when you say you don't have to get rid of anything, or you don't have to change. How can we be clear and yet have the negativity or the neurosis that arises?
No more warfare. Be the neurosis you're trying to get rid of. This doesn't mean validating it or saying it's okay to have this feeling. There's no position on it, but just don't separate yourself from what you're trying to understand or see. In other words, don't look at what's there, whatever's showing up there, and leave that for some kind of idealized clarity about it. The clarity is the confusion. Let me say that again. The clarity is the cloud bank, this Dharma Mega, 10th Bhumi. It doesn't say bright Dharma sunshine of realization. It says Dharma Mega, the true cloud. It's a cloud because it does not show up as relative understanding. It shows up as ultimate understanding. And so it is, we use that relative cloudiness to point to, so that you or me or any of us will not look for our idea of clarity, try to polish something, clarify something, even though that's used constantly in all the teachings. And I can turn around and use it the other way. I can start talking about clarifying. They're relative situations, but it seems that it's necessary to encourage each one of us, to sit down, hold still, and just watch the movement. Just watch the lack of clarity come and go, rather than try to get more clear.
What is missed when we try to adjust the way we're functioning or relating?
Maybe nothing. Can you give me an example?
Well, I was just thinking about if I have a tendency towards aggression or sarcasm, and if I try to
Sarcasm? Let's go ahead. Is your protection cord getting a little tight?
So if I try to modify that or temper that,
Yes.
what am I missing in that interference?
You're probably not. It's just be the important thing is the awareness, not necessarily following some kind of a protocol about what I'm saying, and don't interfere or let things be, which I'm not saying any of that. I'm saying just watch, just observe. Whatever's showing up, that's what you need to see. Now, you might lay something on that. You might say, that's sarcasm is coming up. I need to stop that. That may be completely appropriate at that time, in that situation. And then a week from now, that may show up differently. You may ride it out. You may ride out the sarcasm, the feeling of the sarcasm. And you might also notice that you don't necessarily have to hook up your vocal cords, that the sarcasm has a life of its own in your mind stream without being expressed. It's difficult because that tiger wants to get out of that cage. Go ahead.
Is that a type of refinement that could be worked with the manifestation of our neurosis, physically or verbally?
Yes.
Another question along those lines
Sure.
is that other people's tendencies can trigger us.
Yes.
So when I get upset with somebody, is there a way to still be kind if I'm already upset about what's happened?
Could be difficult. But
So if you've already been triggered, where do you start, or how do we relate to that?
so the way I talk about this, and it may show up differently with different people, but as soon as the intensity, as soon as the anger or the aggression or the dissatisfaction or the the judgment of someone else shows up, insofar as you can, just stay with the texture that's arising there, so that you can see that though that situation is triggering what you're feeling, that you're not getting that feeling from them. So it's your emotional dynamic. If I were to be more literal about it, I might say that something somebody does triggers something you have not observed. So that's why it's sometimes said that everyone is your teacher. That doesn't mean that you can get out of this whole cage of afflictions by saying, oh, the whole world is my teacher. I don't need a personal teacher because I learn from everything. This is, what do I call that? Baloney? Yeah, baloney is a polite word for it. I'm not saying that you couldn't, in a very unusual, unique situation, someone couldn't actually enlighten themselves. Unlikely. So coming back to what Sokuzan is asking about, this happens and that occurs. This happens and that occurs. That's samsara. But with someone who is not looking for clarity, but is clear about confusion, which to the ego mind feels like confusion. Feels like being, I'm confused. But if there's no one there, then the confusion is just dependent origination. It might be a hell of a blast furnace coming at you. But if there's no one there, there may be burning, but there's no one to get burned. Simple kind of image, but and. The impulse for us as human beings in the human realm, or in any of the realms in a sense, is to try to take the negativity and stop it. Try to take the negativity and change it, or pull out its fuel lines or whatever, so we can slow it down or stop it. And I'm not saying you might have to do some of that, but the fundamental misunderstanding is the polarity of self and other, me and that problem. I need to get rid of that so that I will finally get rid of that. Finally, I'm no longer depressed. Just like the woman in the poem from Ferlinghetti is depressed. Not wrong. Sadness, not wrong. It's genuine. It's an actual genuine aspect of being a living being. Sadness, happiness, fear. I don't know if you're ready for any of that. What do you have to do? Well, nothing. You can do whatever you want. There's plenty of energy of the world to continue to go around and keep introducing you to new soap operas, century after century after century after century. Go ahead and do that. You can. But if you're free and well favored, which it looks like you probably are, you could consider finding out what is fundamentally, find out who you are, so you can see that even though there's this incredible illusion of a self, of a me, and of hearing a voice coming out of this whole container, there's no one there. I'm not saying there isn't something there, but the something that's there is no different than the noise the fan is making. Fundamentally, of course, it's an organism, it's biology, but it's just a bunch of juicy plumbing. That wasn't intentional. Maybe I could be a sit-down comedian. So what do I mean? I'm just saying it isn't that it isn't incredibly complicated, especially those of you who are involved in physical therapy, Sokuzan, and other people who are like Mark, who is a doctor, Isan, who is a nurse, and Sokuzan, who is a Chinese medicine acupuncturist. They don't know a lot about this whole situation, but it's just chemistry, and it's just causes and conditions coming and going. So it's not that you are not this, that you're separate from this. No, you're not separate from this, but you're also not limited to this. You're not limited to this human form. Eyes, nose, tongue, body, mind. It's just amazing. And you don't have to get away from it or disconnect from it or stop doing this or stop doing that. What it seems like you have to do from the viewpoint here is train your mind so you can see what is fundamentally true yourself. That's why we do wall gazing. That's why we sit down. That's why the myth of, or the legend of Bodhidharma who cut out his eyelids. He didn't actually cut out his eyelids. He just didn't close his eyes. That's what that's meant to be. He looked at the wall. I think it was 9 years as the story goes. Sit down, hold still, just observe, just observe. Receive the life that is easier if your hands are moving, your body's moving. You know, if you're crossing your legs, crossing your eyes, or whatever you're doing, it's easier to avoid what is coming at you as the otherness. And it's easy to avoid seeing the true nature of the receiver, which is not separate from what's coming at you. They're not two different things. How can that possibly be? I'm looking at you guys are looking at me, and we're separated, that's obvious, but fundamentally we're not separate. What is that? Find out so there's no doubt. All the senses are saying that. Sense of smell is saying not separate. Sense of your feeling of your butt on the cushion is saying not separate. Separated, but not separate. That's why it's a realization, not an accomplishment. It is an uncovering of this incredible jewel in the rubbish heap. You're not going to find the jewel over here where there's more light in the parking lot. You're going to have to look right in the rubbish heap, which is your own mind stream. And don't clarify that, because then you get a clarity about the rubbish heap that does not see that the rubbish heap is not separate from the jewel that is being pointed at. Ego mind, because it does not want to be seen through, is very paranoid about the wisdom mind getting too close of a view of that. The five skandhas all holding hands with each other. Form, feeling, perception, concept, consciousness, all take. Us guys, we're all one. It's done with, it can be, the intellect will help us, of course. That's what we study Dogen Zenji's Shobogenzo. That's why we study the 30 verses of Asabandhu. And that's why we study the various books that we're studying of Trungpa's teachings on meditation and the Buddha Dharma. So we need some of that to keep us lined up so that we can continue, so we have some kind of understanding of, we need to come back to the wall and sit down and just observe what shows up. And for each one here, have a different kind of a story, a different kind of a understanding about what's actually happening there. Kyun, what are you doing in here, Kyun?
Down watching your hands.
Are you? Go ahead.
What when we're looking at the clouds, how do we work on those? We were talking earlier about
Yeah, just look at the confusion. Just look at the. It's not about going in there and trying to turn that into something else, but just looking at it. Even though there are teachings that talk about transmutation, transformation, and doing various tantric practices, and I'm not against those. You want to spend some time doing those, I could tell you how to do it, but I don't promote it because what I'm saying, I promote or I teach what fundamentally helped me, and that's sit down, look at it. Look at it, receive whatever is moving in the mind stream, whatever's moving in the life stream. Don't add, subtract, divide, do nothing with it. Don't meddle with anything, including the cloud or the confusion. That's a little spider. Wonder, do you put, was that part of the Ikebana spider? Interesting.
Earth.
Huh?
Earth.
That's Earth, yeah. Yeah, heaven, earth, and man. Yeah, pretty earthy. I thought maybe that was man. Did you say Earth? Oh, there you are. Yes,
Sugar Valley.
yes, sir.
When we're sitting in meditation, and it doesn't seem like there's a lot of cloudiness, are we ignoring the clouds?
Not necessarily. Not necessarily, but possibly. That you would ask the question would say, you know, the response to you would say, just continue to look at that. That would be something that you could understand, look at more closely, because it's not about not ignoring. I mean, it is, because of the relative situation, but you have to see the way the shutdown happens for it to start to dissolve. You have to see the way it happens without trying to not ignore, to be the person, because ego is looking for a fuel somewhere. It's looking for some kind of nutrition to stay alive, and it'll settle for the worst horrible thing. It'll settle for, as it will settle for a kingdom to heaven, any kind of otherness that it can get, even if it's very negative. This is why we often end up in depression, because there's some kind of intense negativity that we're calling depression. 15 people all say they're depressed. They're not all talking about the same thing. They just don't know whatever else the word to use, so they use that one, perhaps. More.
This past Thursday on the block sit day, it was really intense, and I couldn't sit there. I had to leave for an hour a couple times. And will I eventually have to see that intensity? Will that situation have to come back up, or I don't leave it?
Not necessarily. I follow what you're asking about, but not necessarily. Not necessarily. You may leave and never go back. There's no guarantees of anything, and there's no general. Even though the teachings are all over the place, there's no general teaching that is going to apply to everyone, except the one that other people say it in different ways. But I just say, train your mind. That may be how I teach, maybe how somebody else teaches, may not even be Buddhism. I don't know. But train your mind so that you're actually seeing what's in front of you instead of what you think is in front of you. Most people are looking at their projection, at their opinions, their ideas, their conclusions. They don't see what's there. They don't fundamentally see what's there. If you fundamentally see what's there, you won't see anything, because there isn't anything else. I'm not saying you won't see differentiation happening there, but the desire around the differentiation is no longer propelling some kind of otherness where you are worried about what you don't have, or you can't get, or worried about what you can't get rid of, or worried about what you can't block out or shut away. It's no longer consideration. And why? There isn't anyone. Dependent origination may still be coming and going. More? Junchu,
A question from Susan Alcott in Traverse City.
Susan.
When seeing more clearly simply envelops without expectation, and any time an aha moment that vanishes when the aha is identified.
I don't know. You know, you don't need ahas. I mean, you might get some, but just like seeing a flower or something, it's like an aha. Trapping a hornet in the window of your bedroom, didn't take it outside, it's kind of an aha. It's totally contrast, different. Suddenly you're not doing anything but that. So I'm not sure if I'm even getting close to a response that would be helpful to you. But ahas are not, even if it's the classical term for aha in the Japanese Zen tradition is kensho, or insight into your fundamental nature. Just Insight means it doesn't last. If it lasts, it's not insight. Yes.
Juju Valley, earlier you said if we're at the top of the hill, hang out there. If we're at the bottom, hang out there. How do we hang out wherever we are?
Don't go anywhere. You're right here. If you're right in the middle of anger at somebody, don't. A hair's breadth deviation will fail to accord with a proper attunement, or however that line goes. I'm probably misquoting you. So whatever's occurring, don't deviate. It's difficult, and I think it's probably, what do they say, next to impossible. It is impossible without mind training, because that we get sucked, we're magnetized into the differentiation is there between this and this and this and this, and then there's desire for that, and desire to stop that, and the desire to not be bothered by anything. Those three tend to continue to confirm that we're somebody who's going somewhere, or somebody who can't go there, or somebody who needs this and doesn't need that. More?
If we are already trying to get rid of how we feel, how do we hang out there?
Hang out there. Look at the way you're trying to get rid of how you feel. Hang out there. It's radical. That's why that does not fuel the ego. The ego would be fueled by being able to deal and be not separate from the negativity. Credential. Follow me a little bit? See the smirk on my face? That smirk is just for you. Just whatever's happening, that's it. The rough, raw feeling of whatever's happening in your day, early in the morning when things are not good, you're not even sure why you're having this negativity or the texture to your emotions, you don't even have any cause for it. That's it. That's how it shows up. Without mind training, you'll try to, not condemning you to anything, but there's a likelihood you'll try to find some palliative or somebody to cover that up or shut it down or soften it or take a break from it somehow. But if you continue to train your mind, sit down, hold still, watch the movement, train the mind so that that aspect of the consciousness is on receive as much as possible. On observe and on receive. Something's moving this way, receive it. Something is moving this way, just observe it. Just observe what's coming and going, coming and going. Being a very simple more. Sato.
Sato bowing. On the cushion particularly, is it the trying that's too much?
In a way, it's a little different with each person, so I can't really kind of give a general thing, but specifically to the way you're asking me, and because I know you pretty well, I would say all you have to do is get to the cushion. It's body, speech, mind, that whole complex is not separate. You don't have much say so about the mind stream, particularly, maybe a little bit, but not a lot. So get the body to the cushion or the chair, whatever, sit down, hold still, sit symmetrical as you can without maintenance. In other words, just start out, beginner's mind, just start out, hold very still. And then if you notice your back starting to hurt, move a little bit, but do it very intentionally, then return to stillness. And just note whatever shows up, whether it's trying, not trying, whether it's shutting down, whether it's compassion, aggression, ignorance, anything that shows up in the mind stream is welcome. What you're doing is basically the whole neighborhood of your mind is invited in, and all of the comings and goings that are happening are extremely complicated and are not limited to just this lifetime or to even just to this human consciousness. I'm not saying you're experiencing weird stuff, but you could be. And if you do, it's okay. More? No. Who can I pick on? Is there anybody on the Zoom screen? Yuhong, go ahead, Yuhong.
Homebound. How can I look at the attachment of good memories and making good memories more clearly? Okay, I'm not quite following what it is you want to know. I'm hearing, how can I make
the detachment of good memories and making good memories more clearly. So I probably didn't even repeat what you said, but can you simplify it a little bit for me?
Yes, how can I look at attachment of good things?
Attachment?
Mm-hmm.
No, don't worry about it. Just look at it. I'm attached to ice cream. How about you?
Me too.
Yeah. Okay. So it's just look at it. You don't have to shove it away. You don't have to justify it. You don't do anything with it. I'm not saying there might be other situations that you might have to work with, other attachments that are motivated by other kinds of energy. For instance, I don't have that anymore, but for many years I was addicted to cigarette smoking. And that was a strong attachment that was not just my desire to smoke, but also the biological thing of being the body wanting that to keep doing that. It might be a different dynamic altogether. I mean, what I'm saying, you might have to be just what's transcendentally stubborn? Is that it? Yeah. Come to me and I'll tell you not to do that. So I'm not sure if did I get anywhere near your question? It's okay to be attached to things. I would say just be aware of the attachment. Then you're being respectful to dependent origination. It doesn't let you off the hook. It doesn't mean that because you're so respectful to it that somehow you won't have any more desires. There's no credential involved, but the desire itself needs to be received. You need to feel. When I say you need to, again, I always have a little bit of a comment in there. You don't need to do anything. Do whatever you want to do. I'm not here to control anybody particularly, but if you have questions, I'm all about supporting you based on what I'm seeing in front of me everywhere all the time, which is not separate.
Is that a 3 poison to say that there's no neighborhood, there's no personhood when attachment arises? I tend to say myself, this is not real. This is not what I really see. Is that a sort of like 3 poison?
Somewhat. It's either pushing or pulling or shutting down. That's just a way of talking about it. But it's kind of there's all kinds of chemistry going on where in order for something to for there to be some grasping, there has to be some ignoring about what's being grasped. Because if you're not ignoring what's being grasped, then you are what you're grasping, and that can be quite shocking.
Sokuzan, is there a more clearly?
I think relatively you see something more clearly because it fits with the relative situation of something being more and more clear. So we get tied into the relative structure of relative truth, which there's plenty of volumes and rheostats and everything to control the intensity of something being brighter or darker. So that more clear. So that happens, but to as far as clarity, as far as wisdom, there's just clarity, and it's not separate from ignorance. Ignorance, wisdom, not the same, not different, and there's no the only magnetism. The only thing that magnetizes us in that direction, the direction of the Buddha's Dharma, is wanting the truth, wanting to know what is have this difficulty we're put upon from when we're young, by our parents, by our society, by the confusing nature of the world, by all the warfare that goes on. It's heartbreaking to watch. And so we try to pick and choose. What should I do? This? Maybe I should become a nurse so I can help people. Maybe I should become. Maybe I should go in the military so I can defend the country. There's so many different things that draw us, and it's all relative truth, so it has its own validation. Maybe I should be an attorney so I can help people, or maybe I should be an attorney so I can make a lot of money. Maybe I should become. I can go on and on. But if you want to see the truth, then you might have to step onto the spiritual path, which maybe this path, maybe there's another one I don't know about. Probably so. And that doesn't give us a, even though it's set up that way, there's the 5 paths, path of accumulation, or the however they go. I don't teach those because they're the conceptual structure of those. It's okay, but there's too much elaboration going on there, so I don't care for that too much. The same with the 10 boomies. Four Noble Truths, not too bad. Go ahead.
How is trying to see more clearly different from trying to see the truth?
Same thing. Same thing. Plenty of room to keep going there.
Where is the confusion when one sees more clearly?
The confusion when one sees more clearly is to lock down on it and try to perpetuate that clarity. That's why it's still, if you need the clarity to continue, passion, grasping. If you need a credential to prove that it's clarity, passion. It's a good area to go in. Unless I'm all about my bags are packed. Let's go. Darn. He was headed for a cliff for sure. I was gonna go over with him. Yes, sir.
Sure, what is that preference for clarity over confusion?
Well, because it's relative clarity and relative accomplishment. Relative making $100,000 a year, relative not having a depression. Some people are depressed, other people are not even sure what that word means. They might even want to say, well, just don't be depressed. What are you doing that for? Just get a job. People who are relatively are in different parts of the society speak out of their just belief that they're better than other people. Just like old white men tend to, not all of them, but tend to just think they're better than people that are other races or colors, at least in this country. More?
If we have that preference for relative clarity over confusion, how do we not grasp at that?
Just watch the grasping. So when I say don't do this or don't do that, I know you can't help it. I say that myself. I say don't do that. But when I say don't do that, I know you can't stop that. But by putting some tension on that, then we get more clarity about what that energy is doing when we are grasping and how long the hooks are and how much energy is going to that. Just by witnessing that. And that's what happens when you train your mind to just watch what moves, watch what moves, watch what moves, just receive, just receive. Then when I say, or anyone says, you say to yourself, just have to relax or not grasp that, then then you see the way in which that aspect of the grasping that is dependently arisen, that where you actually have a little bit of say-so about that, where you add on to the grasping. The first part of the grasping is coming out of this. When this happens, that happens. When this is born, these kind of thought patterns happen. Dependent origination. Is that helpful? Why? Don't know. That's the Sokukoji Buddha. You've seen that one? Three people smiled. Yes.
Question from Jeremy in Portland.
Jeremy.
When the body mind returns to the elements, what is reborn?
Rebirth is reborn. So it's just more causes and conditions, more. It just shows up as the individual aspect of it is also dependently arisen. So So the consciousness, and it's because it is so complicated and so diverse, you can't actually lay claim to a past lifetime. You might have some kind of memory structure that is showing up as a past life, but it's not official. It's just consciousness finding its own form. And it may be this life, it may be the last life. Trungpa Rinpoche one time when he was asked about, I might not have this totally correct, but someone, I think it was a woman, was asking about, well, back in 1981, when His Holiness the 16th Karmapa Rangjung Rigpa Dorje was on his deathbed, his parinirvana. I think he had passed away possibly. And they asked, so does this, when His Holiness dies and he is reborn, will it be this, will His Holiness that we know, will this be the one who's reborn? And Mr. Magic Chemicals, or Trungpa Rinpoche, said, this is a paraphrase, so I may have this a little bit off, but I think I'm pretty close. He said, well, your consciousness, or you could mix with His Holiness and you could be the next Karmapa. Great way of describing rebirth. Not individuals. There is no individual. The individual is the illusion. Also, the same way the thoughts that are arising in your mind as I speak are illusory. They're there, but they're like phantoms. They're like dreams. They don't last. You can't find the dream you had last night, and you can't find the thought you had 20 minutes ago. Although it was there, you experienced it. It had some kind of what, substance? No, it didn't have substance. Yes.
Question from Adriana in Kalamazoo.
Yes.
How should I apply my awareness practice in meditation to a post-meditation context that is very uncomfortable and challenging for me?
So it's a pretty general question, but I would say, I can't do too much of that. I don't need to particularly know the personal situation, but I would say insofar as you can, sit a lot. For one, sit a lot, not 20 minutes, hours. Sit a lot so that blade, you use that image, that blade when you go out into post-meditation or your everyday life and dealing with the people in general, you're pretty clear about what the person is saying. Doesn't mean it won't be painful or what the person is dealing with or what you're dealing with, trying to deal with that particular situation, whether it's a coworker or a relative or your partner, excuse me. The idea there is to receive as much as you can, but that doesn't mean you have to torture yourself and stay there and make yourself stay in that situation. Another way, I'll be very direct and literal with you. I'm just going to assume it's probably another person in a particular dynamic or a group of people. I would say stay in your senses as you're receiving what's being said. Don't worry too much about what's being said. You need to know what it is, and you're not picking up on it. You can always say, "What did you say?" Say it again. Say, "Would you write that down?" If it's that important. But just stay in your senses. If they're wearing a red shirt, don't maintain it. Red shirt. Just notice the red. Don't even say shirt. Don't even say red. Just feel. You know what it's like to look at a color without knowing what it is, don't you? If you don't, practice. Look at the wall. Look at the wall without knowing what it is. Look at it until you absolutely have no idea what you're looking at. Stay in the. Don't forget gravity. You're standing there. You can feel the gravity pulling you down towards what? The center of the earth, pulling everybody the same direction. Just looks like it's all different. Just feel the gravity, feel the clothing hanging on your body as you're, or the hot, heat or cool feelings of, those are sixth sense fields. Those are a couple of them that are in the present moment, sense of hearing. Listen to the tone of the voice going up and down rather than the concepts they're spouting. I'm not sure this is going to address your situation particularly, But if you realize that there are lots, all the other five senses other than the mind, and even including the mind to some extent, are right here. You don't hear what happened yesterday, but you think what happened yesterday. Thinking process can go everywhere just because of the nature of consciousness. Whereas the nature of consciousness that has found its own form, sense of hearing, has found its own form, sense of feelings, has found its own form, sense of sight. It's just that. It's in what we commonly refer to as something that really doesn't exist, which is the present moment, unless you believe in time. And I don't disbelieve in time, but I don't necessarily believe it either. You don't have to take a position on anything. Further questions? Don't you?
Question from Ahmed.
Yes.
The looking seems to be much less honest when an answer has already been given. Isn't this a huge problem for a teacher?
No. That it? I don't know. Are you a teacher? Is that giving you a huge problem? Is it a huge problem for you? You're a teacher.
Yu Hongbaoying, how can I look at each moment as fresh and new to work with ego?
Excuse me. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. Fresh and new and all that's all ego language. Don't worry about it. Whatever you're looking at, don't abandon what you're looking at for some kind of interpretation or idea about it, unless that interpretation springs right out of the situation itself. It's pretty hard to walk out early in the morning and notice the air and how fresh it seems sometimes in the morning, depending on where you're living at. Some places aren't so good, but just to feel that morning air before the sun has quite come up yet. So it's not like something occurs and it's what you're sensing is not separate from the situation itself. But you don't have to try to be immediate or try to give it a fresh situation. Meet it where it's at. And it might be gloomy and dull. As I've said many times, I'll say it now. Don't miss your life. Don't live some other idealized life that you'd like to have. Questions? You shoot.
A question from Spool String.
Spool string. Is that a Mr. or a Mrs. or Miss? We don't know. Spool string.
They ask, what is a question?
What is a question? It's the answer. Question and answer are not two separate things. They just look like it. That's why I can sit up here and respond to anything you ask me. And it will kind of sound like, makes sense a little bit. Have you noticed? I don't study for tests. I don't take tests. But you do. You take tests. All of you. Unless you don't. I could say more about that, but I would have to go deeper into where you're coming from on what is a question instead of trying to, if you're just trying to be cute, then my answer will suffice. But if you actually have some deeper understanding about what you're asking by that question, let's go. Yes, sir.
What do you mean that we're taking tests?
Aren't you looking to see if you're doing better? Yeah, I'm not. Yep. Is that what you're looking for? Yeah. Yeah. Yes. Spool string again. No.
A question from Raphael in New York.
Raphael. All right.
Sometimes I sit and it feels like I am making progress. Sometimes it feels like a complete waste of time. How can I sit with these feelings where it is like the more I sit, the more confused and unclear everything becomes?
That's awareness. So the downside is what you're experiencing. The upside is you're doing it. Keep doing it. This is why you need a teacher, not me. It doesn't have to be me, but somebody who can help you see what you're going through and encourage you to keep going. That's what I had. 2 of them. I was an especially hard case of confusion, self-centeredness, and vanity. You might think I still vain. You'd be right. I am very vain. Because I'm not concerned about getting rid of it. Yes.
Another question from School String. Why do I keep forgetting the question is the answer?
Are you old? Yeah. That's, I don't know. I forget. Anyone on the Zoom that has not asked a question? Somebody that looks really confused? No, y'all look pretty good. Okay. Sunho.
Are toddlers enlightened?
Toddlers think they're enlightened. Yeah, they definitely think they got it going on, but no, they're not. The illusion there of their is innocence. They're not really separating themselves from the world, so therefore they're toddling around and are just do whatever they want to do if their parents will let them, and cry and yell. They don't even know they're crying, particularly. They're just hanging out, and the causes and conditions that are rising in that toddler are coming from beginningless time. You could say they're coming from their past life or the 13th century or whatever you want to say, but they're coming from the otherness of the 2 parents coming together, produce that. And then they're there, and then all the causes and conditions that arise there are, it's incredibly complicated from the point of view of relative truth, trying to figure out who said what, when, why this child, if 3 children in a family, 3 brothers or 3 sisters, and they're so different from each other. And that's because that it's so complicated, and that it's not just, there's no one person showing up. Lots of things are showing up. More about that, Sano?
Your description sounded like the same description of awareness, or sitting with things. What is a toddler if not enlightened?
A toddler is in the present moment, so which I think is what you're kind of pointing at, but they're fascinated by it, and the enlightened, the sage or the Buddha is not fascinated by anything. The Buddha doesn't want anything else. The toddler does. The toddler wants that truck or that piece of, what is it they want? You have a toddler. Raisins, wants a raisin. And the Buddha doesn't really need raisins. The Buddha doesn't even need to live. Not that the Buddha is going to go the other way and kind of show off, look how enlightened I am, I can die on the spot. It's not going to go the other way, but doesn't no demand. There's a soft level of desire that totally is a very cooperative with the world. But yet if the teaching person or the Buddha is teaching to a particular person, and that they have given that teacher the permission to teach, that Buddha could look very unhappy, or very demanding, or very any damn thing, because the only vow there of the Bodhisattva or Buddha is to save all beings, starting with your lazy butt. Sano's not smiling. Oh, now he is. Okay.
Jason bowing.
Go ahead, Jason.
How do questions help us on our path, bowing?
It's just a question and answer situation. So you ask a question and I respond And you're bringing, anytime you ask me a question, I, as a functioning as a Dharma teacher, I see the way in which you're missing your true nature. And so then I respond to a way that hopefully, ideally, situationally, is if, as long as there's a lot of sitting meditation going on, that eventually you will begin to stop fighting with your world, stop avoiding what this world is, and see your true nature. So the questions, there need to be some of them. I don't make demands on people. I think it's good to ask questions somewhat. So I would say, relatively, you ask a question about your, whatever's happening with you, your meditation, or how that's feeling. Like a little while ago, someone's asking about when they sit, they're full of stuff going on. And I would say, just observe. We need to hear that over and over again. That's why in the open heart meditation that we do, in fact, that's where I met you at, is at 6 o'clock at night on weeknights. It's about repetition, repetition, repetition. Sit down, hold still, observe. Sit down, hold still, observe. Hold still, observe. Don't maintain it, but have the intention to sit there. Soft intention, almost feminine. Maybe it is feminine. Sit down, hold still. Just receive whatever comes your way, without objection, without agreement, and without no walls of the mind. Takes a while. Takes quite a while. Michael.
I have to leave.
Good to see you.
Good to see you.
See you later. Any final questions?
玉红报应.
Yeah.
You said some toddlers may not know what they're doing. For 6 years old, I don't know other 6 years old. For my daughter, she knows that some part she knows what she's doing. So how can I help her not being caught in the circle at the same time, not really fixing her?
She's going to have to, I appreciate you asking me. You're giving me permission to say something to you about it. I'm saying, and I've said this to you before, and maybe in other words, just protect her. Make sure she's safe so she's not operating out of fear for as little as possible. She's probably bringing some kind of fear-based situation out of an apparent past life. I say apparent because we don't have any proof of that. We have a whole lot of indications that that's going on. But she's not only just what shows up for you, but she's a whole accumulation of things that she needs to deal with. So protect her so that she can do that, and then do it by example. So just like when you're sitting meditation, she comes in and ask what you're doing and meditating. Can I meditate? And you say, yeah. How do I do it? Sit here and hold still. Simple. And then if she goes away, let her come and go. Don't bring her back to. Don't encourage her to meditate. Let that be her business. If she meditates, good. If she doesn't meditate, doesn't meditate. In other words, basically, I'm just saying, basically respect. I mean, you have to be careful because you can't go overboard and let them do whatever they want. Let them break out windows and throw things all over the place. So you can't be too demanding, but it's a not too tight, not too loose kind of idea. But make sure they feel safe. And when I say that, can't always take care of that totally. Might be difficult. We get frustrated with little children when they start spinning around, running this way and running that way. I know I was probably quite a problem for my parents, my mother. Further question about that, Johan?
No, I'm good. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Less is better. One last question, and then we'll call it a afternoon. Would you?
Question from Marco. Often when formulating a question, it seems to answer itself. Should it still be asked for the benefit of the Sangha?
Well said. Yes, it should be. In most, I mean, there might be cases where you wouldn't. But yeah, if you have something and sometimes people even say to me, I had some questions for you, but I kind of figured out what they were. And I said, well, good, then just go away and don't ever come back again. I don't mean that. I mean that to be funny, not sarcastic, but I'm just saying, ask the question. Oh, you don't always know. if I don't have any idea of what I'm going to say, how are you going to have any idea? So, and to go back to Marco, yeah, you could ask. That's a classical way that it's, I think, in the Lankavatara Sutra, one of the sutras where isn't the Buddha saying to Mahamati, thank you for asking on behalf. Thank you for asking that question on behalf of these others. In other words, the Buddha knew that Mahamati knew the answer to this. So it's kind of a, but sometimes you might ask something, the teaching person might be talking about something, and you might see something about that you think it would be good to elaborate on a little bit. So you might ask about that aspect, or of the, say, for instance, are there other kinds of ignorance other than just the three poisons? You know, a dynamic like that, then the teaching person, he or she could go into that area and elaborate. Very good. So we'll close. We're over our allotted time in the stratosphere.
May the merit of this penetrate into all places, so that we and every sentient being together can realize the Buddha's way. The three worlds, all Buddhas, all venerable ones, Bodhisattvas, Mahasattvas, the great Prajna, Paramita.
All Buddhas and Bodhisattvas of the 10 directions and the 3 times, please hear us. Please come down out of the light and protect Sokukoji Buddhist Temple Monastery, our Sangha, families, friends, and visitors. Heal everyone who is unhappy, sick, or suffering, and fill them with light.